This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Welcome back to the Tapped In Podcast. Listen up, everybody, because this week we're talking about the weed and the cannabis and the new news that came down. And what happened today, Mikey, which depending on when you're listening to this, may be a different day, the DEA notified or maybe made signals, maybe is the best way to share this. The DEA says they're planning to reschedule cannabis into a Schedule 3 narcotic or drug or whatever we're on. I mean, we're just beverage folks here, right? Like, we're way out of our depth in talking about all these fancy terms. But a Schedule 3 is a substance that is very similar to like ketamine, steroids, Tylenol, considered considerably less dangerous, Mikey. Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. What's crazier is they have ketamine in the less dangerous. I always thought that was pretty dangerous, but yeah, it's crazy that this day has come. I think we knew it would be here one day, but none of us really knew when, but here it is, right? And now, what does that mean?
Yeah, so like a big thing for the crew to know is that one of the biggest things that changes about moving from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 is that there can be opens up a lot of research and development opportunities. There's some rules and regs around what you can and cannot research and how you can get grant funding and how you cannot get grant funding in a Schedule 1 versus a Schedule 3. So that is a big deal just from like, there's a lot of things that are not known about marijuana, positive and negative, around cannabis or marijuana or whatever we want to call it. So that's one thing. And then the other side is like, if it's not a Schedule 1 and now it's a Schedule 3, how do the states start to handle it? Because, you know, we're from Michigan, where it has been recreationally legal for, what do you think, like 3 or 4 years now, I think?
Yeah, that sounds about right, 3 or 4.
And it was medically legal, like in the middle wave of being that's probably more like maybe 8 to 10 years it's been medically legal. So you've got states like Michigan that are kind of in the middle ground. You got states like California, which are incredibly at the forefront of like, they've had medical marijuana for decades now. So it's a whole nother animal out there. And then states like Minnesota, which have a burgeoning Delta 9 variant business where it's already made its way into the beverage space, not commingling with alcohol. They're not infused products. They're just Delta 9 cannabis or Delta 9 variant cannabis beverages. So all of this is crazy. There's a lot of new things that are going on with this. Mikey, what do you think this means for beverage? Let's just take it from beverage in general to start with, and then we'll lead into beverage alcohol.
Yeah, beverage total, I don't think it's going to have as much of an impact as it is for beverage alcohol.
Yeah.
I read a statistic the other day that was a little crazy here in Michigan. You know, we always pride ourselves on our breweries, and, you know, we had a brewery in every corner in every town. And I think at last count, we had 400 or 450 breweries, and now we have over 1,000 dispensaries. So it's pretty crazy how fast that happened. But yeah, I mean, as far as we're gonna see it cut in. We've seen it firsthand here in Michigan. On the other end, you know, non-alcoholic beers have taken off, I think, which is a direct correlation of cannabis. But yeah, we're gonna see that cut in, and I don't think it's gonna be very good, in my opinion.
So to stay on the quick wavelength with like the number of dispensaries versus breweries. So in Battle Creek, Michigan, where I'm from, and Mikey, you went to high school. You went to Lakeview too, didn't you?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. But like Mikey and I are both from Battle Creek. We have this part of town which is affectionately called the Motor Mile. That's where all the car dealers are. And we also now have this new thing called the Green Mile, which is where all the dispensaries is taken to it, because we know the Motor Mile and it's a joke, and we have signs and everything. It was a whole big marketing campaign when we made the Motor Mile, and we actually put up real signs and everything. I haven't seen any Green Mile signs yet, but at some point in time, maybe we do see some Green Miles. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, we tried to count all the dispensaries on that one stretch one time, and I think we lost count at about 15 within a few miles. It was pretty
You need one
insane.
of those clickers. That you just
Yeah,
gotta. You're gonna lose. You're gonna forget, especially if you're sampling along the way, which shouldn't do that and drive. But you need one of those clickers to keep track of
yeah.
everything.
Going back to not only the oversaturation of dispensaries, the availability of it too, but pricing. Pricing is huge, and that is hurting the alcohol industry as well. And at least here in Michigan, when it first became legalized for recreation, prices were pretty high. And a lot of talk on the street was it's too expensive, and it's not going to cut into beer, it's not going to cut into alcohol because it's just too expensive. But I mean, you fast forward over those 3 or 4 years now, and there's so much competition. You can walk into a dispensary and buy 100 milligrams of gummies for $5. You're not going to walk into a packaged liquor store for $5 and find that kind of a impact for $5. So I think potency, yeah, yeah. So I guess buck for your bang, THC has there too. And even with the infused and the Delta 9 stuff, it's pretty cheap. You can get a 16-ounce can of infused tea, I believe it was 10 milligrams, for $3 or $4
Yeah.
around that one. So
Now, from the beverage industry, and this is just us. I mean, this is all brand new news, and we don't have a lot of knowledge in like the carbonated soft drinks area. Do you think that Coke and Pepsi get involved in this space with a completely legalized Schedule 3? If that does happen, and if it does stick, and it doesn't get challenged in the courts, or if this is the method of the madness to be able to do it as well, because this is all, like we said, brand new. Do you think that Coke and Pepsi jump in?
I think they would be dumb not to try.
I
But
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a race to the finish. Who can do it first? Who can get there faster? Obviously, Coke and Pepsi own the majority of the NA space, but is that where it's going to belong? Where is the product going to fall? Right now, at least in the states where Delta 9 is, I don't see it in any cooler space at all. It's a standalone display outside of the cooler, away from Bevel, away from NA. Here in Michigan, you can only get it in dispensaries, so you have to go to a dispensary to buy it. But yeah, where is it going to fall? And is it going to be owned by Coke and Pepsi space? Yeah, who knows?
It's a fascinating idea. So let's touch real quick on what Delta 9 is. So Delta 9 variant, because this is the most type product, is fastest to market, seems to be either legislatively the most acceptable, or where the manufacturers, the makers of these products have moved in. But Delta 9 contains a price dose. I'm going to read something off. Price dose of Delta 9 THC, which is derived from cannabis. These drinks are formulated to provide psychotropic or how do you say that? Psychotropic. This is dyslexia coming out. Effects of THC, similar to experiences when cannabis is smoked and or vaped, but through the ingestion tract, because obviously we're drinking these things. So they can be sodas, they can be teas, non-alcoholic beers, wines. A variety of different options are out there in the market. Mikey, we've had some experience actually working in the field with a wholesaler in a really well-defined, a really well-developed Delta 9 market. What was your experience there in the field?
I was shocked. That was my first time being anywhere in a state where Delta 9 was present. And when we walked into an on-premise location, and you could sit at the bar and you had a choice of a beer, a pack of gummies, or a THC infused drink. Now, technically, the law states you can't have both. You can't mix. So if a consumer has a beer, they're not legally allowed to sell them THC. But again, there's probably not a whole lot of regulation going on. There's nobody really watching that. But it was crazy to see on premise. It was crazy to see everywhere off premise, gas stations, convenience stores, packaged liquor. So that part was mind blowing. The good side of it was that this distributor had it, right? So they had, although it may and it was cutting into to above elk, they were controlling it. They were grabbing the profits off it. And speaking of profits, it is highly profitable. The GP on this stuff was crazy.
Yeah. Highly profitable. Now, the profit per case is really high. The velocity is considerably lower as well. But in a world where we need to kind of be more creative with our portfolio and kind of stack up opportunities, This is something that is an opportunity for beverage distributors to look at adding into the portfolio and finding ways to make that incremental profit off of losses that might be happening or dilution that might be happening in other parts of the portfolio of classic beer or even heavy alcohol content beer. But it's so weird though. Like there's a couple different weird things. Like you can see one of the hottest brands in the country right now is Athletic Brewing, non-alcoholic beer. And one of the other hottest brands is going to be all the Voodoo Ranger stuff at 9% of the alcohol. And people ask me, like, why do you think that is? And it's like, because those people don't meet in the same internet sphere. Because the people that are in like this little echo chambers that we get into on the internet, the people that are in the athletic brewing realm and in the kind of non-alcoholic realm, like they're listening to this, the industry being attacked around no alcohol is safe, no amount of alcohol is safe. And then there's another side of the industry or of the consumer that is just like not even paying attention to that side of the internet and just in their own little echo chamber. And they're like drinking what they want to drink and they're doing their thing and they're looking for 7 or 8, 9% alcohol beers. And I just don't know where this Delta 9 falls in where THC falls in the conversation of all the different discretionary dollars that a consumer has. Because for me, it's like a cultural thing first. Like I grew up a dare kid, you grew up a dare kid. We were educated around just say no to drugs. Marijuana is a gateway drug. And then like you've got a couple young kids, I've got the nieces that are younger than yours, and like they didn't have dare.
Right.
Like they haven't been taught that. So there's probably more of like a slingshot kind of a thing that's happened where, we're pulling back the slingshot on the regulatory and the product availability and the product market fit. And as that consumer becomes less stigmatized and grows older, being us, and that younger consumer comes in, the Gen Zers, your kids, our nieces' ages, we're talking about teenagers and below, where they don't have that stigma at all. Like that 10, 15 years over onto a whole new market for all the manufacturers and all of the distributors out there listening around what, like, how do I play a role in this? But you have to build, in my head, you kind of have to build the foundation of that now. If you're a distributor, you have to be thinking about how do I build the foundation of this now?
Yeah. When I was with the distributor in Minnesota that had Delta 9 and I was riding with the rep, that's the first thing he said. He said, man, I've been selling beer for a long time. He goes, I never thought I'd be a drug dealer. Here I am. But we do have to separate that. And when we separate THC from the Schedule 1 to the Schedule 3, I overall think that's a good move, right? If we're always saying, hey, drugs are bad, drugs are bad, drugs are bad, and then all of a sudden, oh, well, marijuana is okay, but hey, it's the same classification as heroin. When we separate that, and now, hey, drugs are bad. These drugs are extremely bad. Don't ever play with them. I think that is a good move. I also think I'll go back to your comment when you were talking about Athletic doing so good. When we were launching another completely NA brand in Michigan, and I did a lot of research and wanted to find a lot of, just market trends, what's going on. At least in the Midwest, we always watch the West Coast. What happened in the West Coast would happen here trend wise 2, maybe 3 years later. So watching Athletic and the rest of the NA brands just explode over there. And when I would go around and talk to retail accounts, introducing our NA brands and saying, hey, did you know that there are standalone breweries on the West Coast that are just completely NA? And it blows their mind and they don't get the concept. But now we fast forward a few years and now we're kind of caught up. We're in the same boat. Recreational marijuana has been around for 3-4 years now. And there is a customer base for that where, hey, I would rather not get drunk. I don't want to get drunk, but I want a few beers.
Yeah. Those weird coast people. Weird coast people. And us Midwesterners and our corn-fed, it's flyover state, middle of the country thought processes here. The other side of that too is just that the drinking and driving laws have really slowed a lot of people down from being out drinking. Like I get it. And in these smaller markets like ours in Michigan, like let's face it, Uber and Lyft and those kind of car services are not readily available as what they are in other markets. So you do have to be smart, reasonable about what you're doing for sure. So Mikey, when you're thinking about this, there's another part of this that beer distributors and beverage distributors are really going to kind of wrestle with, which is drug testing.
Yeah.
We already have like a case of two classes in this where put on your operational manager hat, where you got a DOT crew in the drivers that are driving CDLA or CDLB trucks, and like they have to be randomized at some kind of regulated legislative interval. And then you've got the rest of the crew, which is in a complete, the warehouse crew and the sales crew and the admin crew, which like they don't have those same level requirements. And what are the requirements for DOT? Do you remember them off the top of your head?
Federally regulated, so I believe it's monthly. Your entire pool
Has to be pulled and randomized, and there's a percentage of the pool that has to be tested every single month.
Yeah.
So like that's
drivers. It's anybody with a CDL.
Anybody with a CDL. Okay. So that is mandated and has to be done. So there's a clear like line of sight on what needs to be done and how that's going to work. But then you got everybody else too. And like the challenge that I always had was you'd want to welcome people in. I mean, this is just my philosophy. Like if you don't let somebody in a world like this where we dealt with legalized recreational marijuana in Michigan, if you have somebody who's never going to get a CDL or doesn't want one, but you want their help or you need them to come work for you, like how do you welcome that person into the network of employees, but then treat another group of employees completely different as the two different classes? I just always have a hard time. I had a hard time with that. That is the number one thing that employers are looking for, and that employees, I think, frankly, are looking for too, around direction of, I don't want to be treated differently, but I also get that I have a job classification that requires me to be treated different.
I think in testing gets to where we can test somebody to see if they're under the influence right now. Did they smoke 2 nights ago or eat edibles 2 nights ago? I think when testing comes along that far to where we can actually see if somebody's under the influence right now, I don't see that changing.
Yeah, I don't either.
You really don't want somebody driving a truck drunk, but we can test them and know if they've been drinking. You really don't want somebody driving a truck high, but right now there's really no way to test to see if they're under the influence right now.
And these systems have gotten completely like very, very sophisticated. Like if we with a DOT number, if we catch somebody drinking and driving or fails a drug test or anything like that, we have to submit that to a federal like clearinghouse. And that clearinghouse that goes on their record and forbids them from getting another role in that CDL. So it has gotten incredibly sophisticated on the alcohol front and on the what we call like prescription legalized drugs front to kind of manage the exposure to consumers or other drivers around these drivers that are not safe. So that is a great thing that has changed a lot. That wasn't even something that was a reality when you were running the operations either, though, was it? It was all still pencil and paper, really.
Yeah, we drew out of a bucket.
Yeah, so like now it's completely moving in a different direction. It's all digitized, and we all share this. We share this clearinghouse nationally across the country, which is unreal. The government's made it that far, but that's where we're going. And like, if they do move forward with this, because this is still an if, they've just signaled that they're moving in this direction. If they do move forward with this, like a whole new host of challenges and opportunities are going to come up for us business owners around managing around this. One more thing to touch on too is that obviously tax is always a big thing in beverage alcohol, and how these things are going to be taxed, how they're not going to be taxed. What is it? Pot for potholes has been a tagline for the longest time. Big in Michigan too, because we're always talking about fixing the damn roads in Michigan. So that kind of tax implication is going to be a big deal. And the beverage alcohol world, like the lobbying pocketbook that the beverage alcohol has, just isn't as big as some of these other players. The pharmaceutical companies have way deeper pockets when it comes to lobbying around tax implications or things like this. Same thing with carbonated soft drinks. Those companies are every bit as big and I think, in terms of from a manufacturing standpoint, more organized than the brewers industry is from beverage alcohol. In beverage alcohol, you've got brewers that are one association federally and nationally, better said nationally. And then you got the distillers that are in another one, and then the winemakers in another one. But in CSD, like it's just one, like it's the soft drink
Yeah.
association. So, and they've had fights like this before. I mean, they had to fight the sugar tax. So, like, they know what they're doing when they're talking about like sugar tax and diabetes taxes and things like that. Like, they know how to have these kinds of discussions, battles, and go to war legislatively over this. So, that's another piece of the puzzle that is like out there for beverage alcohol and beer distributors, because that's who we work with primarily to kind of consider and focus on and understand is that we might be behind the eight ball in a few different ways. Now, long term, who knows how the brands are going to play out? Because ultimately, this all comes back down to product market fit, loyalty, and consumer behavior. And whoever has the best brands, whoever gets the right share from a shelf space and the right display and feature, that is who is going to win ultimately, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We've seen Tilray put all their chips in one basket trying to line themselves up for this one day, right? And I think too, it comes down to regulation. How is this going to be regulated? I mean, last thing we need is a pay to play in the THC space when you get Coke or Pepsi on board, and if they grab these brands and there's a pay to play type of aspect where they're just going to go out and buy their own THC door, and that's going to come right from the beer space. We know that they're not going to eat their own space,
No.
but yeah, I mean, who knows where this is going to go? Is it going to be? I bet you we're going to see a mix of soda. We're going to see a mix of beer. I don't know, beer flavored. I mean, what are we going to have? A THC infused IPA, THC infused blonde. I guess the possibilities are endless.
Well, we already tried the Emperor.
The Emperor, yeah. Those are great opening your CEW. Oh man. Cops didn't show up that day. We dumped up 30 some cases of it of bottles and the bottle all broke. And yeah, it smelled like we were definitely a dispensary instead of a beer distributor.
Well, little legal inside baseball too, or regulatory inside baseball too. Like in Michigan, the state has already banned marijuana infused alcohol. So there's that element of like some regulatory changes that if an infused alcohol or a cannabis infused alcohol product does come to market in certain states, because I don't believe Michigan's alone. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't believe that Michigan is alone in doing that type of a ban already. But those kinds of some things might need to be redone, some things may need to be recreated. Who has the regular state? Because alcohol is state regulation. Who has the regulation for marijuana in the state? And if it's an alcohol product, is it the liquor control, the local liquor control, or state liquor control? Or is it the, whatever the equivalent for a food and drug would be for the state as well? So there'll be fights over that at states by state level too, for who actually owns the regulatory changes and regulatory approval and regulatory rulemaking on a state by state basis as well too. So lots of crazy stuff. This is a fast moving thing. I'm sure it will accelerate through the remainder of the year for sure. But something that we want to talk about because it does impact the industry. I mean, we've talked about it, but I don't think anybody's really done a ton of hard research on it. So I think it's kind of fun to talk about it, think about it, and wait for some better research around how this is going to impact the industry for years to come now, for sure.
Yeah, we'll look back at this podcast like a time warp in 10 years and we'll know.
We'll see how much we're right or how much
Yeah.
we're wrong. Mikey, you can always be often wrong, but never in doubt.
Should we make some predictions?
Fire away.
I don't have any yet, but I see some big names getting involved for sure.
You think like celebrities and or
Oh yeah, as far as endorsements, influencers for sure, but I'm talking big brand names too. I mean, I don't think that they would go as far as putting Coca-Cola and Pepsi, but I mean the Delta 9 variants that we saw, that was Jones Soda, right? Mary Jones or
Mary
Mary
Jones was one of them. Yep.
Mary Jones. So I see some big names in the industry on the NA side and on the Bev side coming forward with their THC versions.
Yeah. The opportunity, and chaos. Chaos breeds opportunity like water grows grass. Love it. Well, I think it was a good episode. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. We'll be back next week for another episode of Tapped In. Cheers.